Hi, my name is Sam Riley. Welcome to Union Mills here today for this interesting program. We're very pleased to have you here, and it's of particular note that we're gathered here at this tannery building at Union Mills to talk about early industry in Carroll County, because this tannery, of course, was the site of another early industry in Carroll County, that of tanning hides. So today we're here for an interesting program related to grist mills. Today's program is tied to a new exhibit that we have in our grist mill. And the mill exhibit is entitled The Grist Mill, Early Industry in Carroll County. The programming was prepared in partnership with the Smithsonian and the Carroll County Farm Museum, where there's a special display on exhibit called The Way We Worked, which is available to be visited through July 14th. This programming was created by the National Archives, which was made possible here in Carroll County through a partnership with the Smithsonian and Maryland Humanities. I'm pleased to introduce today Dr. Mark Denny, who is coming to us today from Vancouver. Dr. Denny was born in England and has a PhD in theoretical physics from Edinburgh University. He spent 20 years as a radar and sonar systems engineer in the aerospace industry. Dr. Denny has written extensively on a number of very interesting topics, and they are particularly of interest in what we're going to be talking about today. He has written in various scientific journals about things such as swords, catapults, pendulums, siege machines, and most significantly to us, water wheels. Without further ado, I introduce to you Dr. Mark Denny.
So we'll be talking about the Industrial Revolution. And actually there's three industrial revolutions. The first one took place in the United Kingdom, in particular in England, southern Scotland, let me get this right, Northern Ireland and southern Wales. Between these dates here, I've got a pointer somewhere, I'll get that. Between around about 1760 and 1830, the dates are a little wishy-washy. You can move them up and down a decade, either way. But the significance of the first industrial revolution in England was that there was key innovations made, key inventions by some smart guys and some motivated entrepreneurs. And they invented machines which improved the means of production of certain goods. In the case of England, it's very largely goods to do with the textile industry. And these machines were then placed in mills. We can't yet call them factories, but they are mills, and these mills they gathered people around them. They grew up into new towns and cities, and the people would come in from the countryside for employment in these mills. And it changed society. The innovations, these new machines, for improving production changed society. Not always for the better, but sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. That's the first industrial revolution, 1760 to 1830, generally considered to be in the UK, which is to say England and Scotland mostly. Then the second industrial revolution took place between around about 1850 until 1920, and that was in Western Europe and North America principally. And the second industrial revolution, part of it was simply a spreading of the first industrial revolution to these other parts of the world. But more importantly, there were key developments in the second industrial revolution. In particular, the modern factory was invented with a production line. And the production line turned out goods very inexpensively compared to previously. And this meant that people's lives improved significantly as a result of the second industrial revolution. And there's a kind of parallel timeline I'd like you to bear in mind of technological progress. From the first industrial revolution, say the beginning of the first industrial revolution to the end of the second industrial revolution, there's a continuous improvement in production and in the design and invention of machines to do the production, so that we went from craft industries to mills to factories to modern production lines. And at the same time, the way these machines and factories were powered changed. At the beginning of the first industrial revolution, the main source of power for the machines in the mills was water wheels. We used water wheels to provide power. Then later on, steam engines took over from water wheels. And then later on, production lines were powered by electricity, and the electricity came from dedicated power plants, as today. So by the end of the second industrial revolution, the production lines were powered by electricity, as they are today. And the electricity came from dedicated power plants that were that used turbines to generate the electricity. And turbines are a technological descendant, a direct technological descendant of water wheels. So we have a continuous kind of progress, both of machines in factories and the technology that powered those machines. Now, for completeness, I'll add that there's a third industrial revolution that began much more recently. It began in 1990. Now, where is my pointer?
On the podium.
Where is it going?
On the podium.
On the podium. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much. Yes. This isn't really relevant to my talk, but just for completeness, I'll mention it. There's a third industrial revolution. It began around about 1990 here in the United States. It spread very quickly to many other parts of the world, and it's still ongoing and will be going on for several more decades at least. And of course, this is due to the digital electronics revolution. Digital electronics have meant that the control and function of factory machines has greatly changed. If you know anything about the auto industry, you'll know how it's changed over the last quarter century due to digital electronics. But also there's a continuing change because the digital electronics has given us the internet, and that changes the way that the factory products are marketed and distributed and things like this. So that's an ongoing revolution, the third industrial revolution. But that's really got nothing more to do with our story, so I'll be concentrating on the first and second industrial revolution. And how does this fit in with the union mills? Well, I will show you how. What I'm going to do, I'll explain about water wheels and how they evolved and how they fit in the wider scheme of the Industrial Revolution, which is taking place over much of the world. And by telling you about these things, I'm painting a picture which is like a background in which you can embed what we know about the union mills and see how it fits in to the sweep of history that's going on. And I'll start by talking about the very earliest type of water wheels. And these go back a long way. They're called Norse wheels because archaeologists have found examples of them, quite a lot of examples of them in the Norse countries and Scandinavia, but really they've been found all across Eurasia, as far away as China. And you can see here a simple diagram of how they worked. The axle was vertical, and the bottom of the axle there are paddles, and the water is directed onto one side of the axle, so the paddles turn, and that causes the axle to turn. You have a simple water wheel. And this little illustration here, I took this from a Scottish website about, I think it was an Iron Age settlement reconstruction, and they've got a website which shows a Norse wheel here being used in a simple grist mill. The water down here gets the paddles turning, and here's the axle which then rotates. The axle's attached to the millstone, and here's a cutaway of a millstone, and so the millstone turns, and you have a simple grist mill. For every turn of the paddles, every complete rotation of the paddles, you have one complete rotation of the millstone, so the gear ratio is 1 to 1, if you like. I must say that the engineer in me is a little skeptical about this picture. You have a tiny little paddle wheel turning a great big millstone. But, I mean, there's a little bit of artistic license here, but you get the picture. There's you can see how a simple mill could be made from this type of a water wheel. And over the centuries, over many centuries, over many centuries, the design of water wheels improved, and certainly by the Roman period and well into up until the 19th century, this was a popular design called the Overshot wheel. By now, the axle has become horizontal, it's not vertical. The wheel rotates about that axle. And in this particular case, water is channeled into the top of the wheel, and it therefore passes over the axle. And therefore, that's where we get the name Overshot from. Water passes over the axle with this particular design. And you can see how it works. In fact, the water powers the wheel in two different ways. First of all, the flow of the water pushes against the paddles. And so you can see it would cause the top of the wheel to be pushed to the right, and therefore the wheel turns clockwise. But there's another reason. The weight of the water, what physicists call the gravitational potential energy, the weight of the water causes the wheel on the right to be pulled down, and again that causes the wheel to turn clockwise. So that's how the Overshot water wheel works. Now there's a potential issue that has to be solved with these types of wheels, because now you have a horizontal axle like this for the water wheel, but imagine if this is connected to a grist mill, it needs to connect to the vertical axle of the millstone. How do you connect the two? Well, you do it by gears. One of the key gears is called the lantern pinion. But over the centuries, the gears that connected the water wheel to the millstone in a grist mill, these became more and more sophisticated. The gearing became more and more sophisticated. So the gear ratio no longer was automatically 1-to-1. You could change the gear ratio to make the best possible use of your mill. And that gear ratio may vary depending on the application of the mill. If a grist mill may have a different gear ratio from a sawmill or something like this. Now, one important constraint on the use of Overshot water wheels was that they really could only be built in hilly country where there was a significant slope to the land. And you can see why at the input side of the mill, the water is significantly higher than at the output side, so you needed a real slope, otherwise you couldn't build this type of water wheel. Here we've got a historical water wheel. The mill, the head race is here. This is the channel of water that is brought in, and it pours onto the top of the wheel, and I guess in this case it causes it to turn counterclockwise. And we have another example. I've got this one, got these pictures from the internet. This one's somewhere in Virginia. It's a very pretty picture, I think. Another Overshot water wheel. Here's the channel, the head race that brings the water onto the wheel, causing it to turn. A much more common design was the Undershot wheel. And the Undershot wheel is so called because the water passes underneath the axle, not over the axle. And you can see how it powers the wheel. The flow of water presses against the paddles and the wheel turns, in this case counterclockwise. But it doesn't make use of the weight of the water, that gravitational potential energy that I told you about. And so, for that reason, these Undershot design of water wheels are not as efficient as Overshot water wheels. But what they lack in efficiency, they make up for in use. They're more common. I don't know what the ratio is, something like 10 times as many, don't quote me exactly, something like that, something like 10 times as many Undershot water wheels as Overshot, simply because they can be built on flat land, fairly flat land. In the Middle Ages, people tended to settle flat river valleys with sluggish, slow-flowing water, where you couldn't possibly build an overshot wheel. There wasn't enough slope on the land. But you could build undershot wheels, and these were very common as a consequence. And at this point, I should point out something of the physics or the science of water wheels. The power that a wheel generates, and this is quite a general statement, it doesn't matter which type of wheel it is. The power of a water wheel increases with the radius of the wheel. So a bigger wheel generates more power. That's probably not surprising. But also the power of a water wheel increases with the flow rate of water that's pressing against the paddles. So increase the flow rate and you increase the power of the water wheel. And here's an example of an old water wheel, undershot variety. The water's down here somewhere, and it's causing this wheel, I guess, to rotate clockwise in this case. Notice how wide this wheel is. And the reason for that is because the wider the wheel, the more water can flow against it. And remember that power increases with increased flow, and therefore a wider wheel is more powerful than a thinner wheel. So that's why it's wide. And I must mention the breast shot wheel. It's called breast shot because in this case, the water, as you can see from this picture on the left, it enters the wheel abreast of the axle. In other words, about the same height of the axle. It's technically an undershot wheel because the water passes underneath the axle, but it's a hybrid. It's got some of the characteristics of the overshot wheel. You can see for this quarter of the rotation that the weight of the water is contributing to turning the wheel. And so the efficiency of breast shot wheels is actually intermediate between undershot and overshot. And I mentioned breast shot because the Union Mills here, the original water wheels were breast shot, which I guess reflects the fact that we're in not mountainous country here, but not flat country, but gently rolling hills. We've got enough elevation to have this kind of wheel. And the Union Mills were first built in 1797. Two of them, a grist mill, and that's what I'll be concentrating on here in this talk, and a sawmill. They were commissioned by two brothers, Andrew and David Shriver, and in building these mills, the Shrivers were starting a very successful business. I understand that the mill was in continuous operation until the 1940s, and the Shriver family is still strongly associated with the mills today. The important thing from my point of view, from our point of view, is that the mill was designed by a man called Oliver Evans, and it was a very revolutionary mill. I'm now talking about the grist mill. Oliver Evans invented a new way of milling flour in grist mills that was fully automated, and that will be significant. What I want to convince you of in this talk is, maybe convince is the wrong word, I want to argue for the fact that what Oliver Evans was doing in designing an automated grist mill and in employing it here in local industry, and it was a major local industry in this part of the world. What he was really doing, he was bringing the first industrial revolution across the Atlantic to this part of the United States. Because we tend to think of the first industrial revolution, if you remember from the first slide, as being confined to the UK, to England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Southern Wales. But really, Oliver Evans was bringing it over here. The major local industry, yes, the grist mills, not just grist mills, but water-driven mills were a very important part of the local economy in this region. The young United States was a largely agricultural country, and the main agricultural product in this part of the world, right here in this region, was wheat. Well, you have wheat, you need mills to make flour. Of course, mills were used for other purposes, sawing wood, tanning leather, etc., etc. But grist mills were a major industry here. Now we come to a somewhat surprising, to me, connection between the three subjects I've been talking about. And I've talked to you about water wheels, and I've said something about the industrial revolutions, the first industrial revolution across the Atlantic in the UK, the second industrial revolution, which took place later here, and the Union Mills. And the connection is this guy called John Smeaton. It's surprising because Smeaton was an Englishman who worked in England. As far as I know, he never visited the United States. But he was in, and we'll see why he is the connection. He was a clever guy. He was an inventor and a practical man. He'd done quite a lot of civil engineering works. He built a famous lighthouse in the south of England called the Edison Lighthouse. He built bridges and harbours, and more importantly for our purpose, he had built 43 mills powered by water. And the reason he did this was because he had been asked to look at the most efficient design for water wheels, wheels that produce the most useful power. And he tinkered around with the design for overshot wheels, undershot wheels, breast shot wheels, all kinds of design parameters he changed until he came to the most efficient design, and he wrote up his report in 1759. That date was right at the beginning of the first industrial revolution in the United Kingdom. And people were interested in this because this was right at the time when people were wanting to power their new machines that they'd invented to make money by making new products, or by making existing products less expensively. So they were interested in an efficient design of water wheel. In fact, the very concept of efficiency was invented by John Smeaton. He is a guy who had both practical and theoretical knowledge, a bit like the guy, in fact, a lot like Oliver Evans, who was the guy who designed the mill that was used here, the automated grist mill. In fact, this is the connection. Oliver Evans read Smeaton's report and was impressed by it. He said that Smeaton was the only author who joined practice and experience with theory. And that's something that Oliver Evans did too. So he read about Smeaton's efficient water wheels, and he was influenced by Smeaton and by other people too, who had invented different machines which he adapted for generating or for creating his automated grist mill. Now, okay, I'm throwing in a little bit of math just to show you that there is, in fact, it's not all practical. There is theoretical content. In fact, there's significant theoretical content in the operation of these machines, water wheels, and their technological descendants, water turbines. This is a page taken from doctoral thesis of a young Swiss engineer only 10 years ago. It's still an area of active research. And I note the mathematics here. Please take careful note of this, because I'll be testing you on it later. Just kidding. Just to show that there is significant theoretical content in this subject. And now we come to Oliver Evans. You can see from his dates when he was born and died that he overlapped with the first industrial revolution in the UK in time, but not in place. He was in the place of the second industrial revolution, but not in the time. He was 50 years ahead of the second industrial revolution. He was born in Delaware. He was an inventor, an engineer, a businessman. Sounds a lot like Oliver Smeaton. John Smeaton. And Oliver Evans is known for the automated grist mill that I told you about or mentioned. You'll learn a lot more about that, and you can see a reconstructive one if you go to Mount Vernon, as I was very fortunate to do on Friday. Wonderful tour. And this automated grist mill was adapted here. As I said, the mill that was originally built here in 1797 was an Oliver Evans design. There was lots of other mills built in this area to this design. Evans patented his design, and he was very vigorous in enforcing his patent. He would go around the different mills in the area and see if millers had used his design, and if they had done so without paying him for the pleasure of permission to do so, he would sue them. And it's, he created many lawsuits as a consequence. He was unpopular, and one historian has said he deserved much of the hostility he aroused. It's rather sad because he died actually rather embittered, as I understand it, because he felt he was not given enough credit for the work that he did. The work he did was quite, it was very significant. This fully automated grist mill was significant. After he'd finished the fully automated grist mill, he went on to develop steam engines, a high-pressure steam engine, similar but different from the very successful steam engine that James Watt had perfected just across in Britain and made commercially viable just a few years earlier. And here is a picture taken from Evans' book about milling, and it illustrates his automated system for grist mills. Yeah, the success of these grist mills comes from the results that he obtained from them. They worked so much better than earlier designs. He could make flour more consistent and higher quality than earlier designs. He could make that flour more quickly. He could make it less expensively. And because it is made more quickly, and there was fewer people working it was just one or two people working in his automated grist mill. That's all you needed to get it going. Because it was automated and it worked quickly, there was less chance of contamination of the flour. This was significant. And if an Oliver Evans mill had been built in Westminster, England, instead of Westminster, Maryland in 1797, people would automatically have assumed, okay, that's just part and parcel of the first industrial revolution. It takes place in England. It's a new machine for improving production of a particular item, in this case flour. And it's powered by water, just like the first stages of the first industrial revolution. Well, I'm sure I'm not the first person to argue that really by doing his stuff over here, what Evans was doing was bringing the first industrial revolution to the United States. He was well ahead of his time, perhaps 50 years ahead of his time, viewed from this perspective that I'm trying to suggest to you of the Union Mills viewed against the backdrop of the wider developing industrial revolution. He was half a century ahead of his time. And that's really all I have to say on this subject. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
So I'm Jane Sewell. I'm the director here at the Union Mills Homestead. And first off, I want to welcome all of you here and thank all of you for coming. Really, this is very special to have Dr. Denny and his wife Jane here from Vancouver. We were thrilled. And Dr. Denny's book is for sale down there, and he will be signing the book in a very few minutes. The other thing I wanted to say to you is the mill will be open, and for walkthrough tours, we do have the exhibit there from the Smithsonian exhibit that we have created. I think you will find it extremely interesting, well worth your time, and a lot of the questions that you have will be answered as you go through and read some of those display panels. They're outstandingly done, and we're very proud of them, so I hope you will take time to do that. We also have some light refreshments over here that I hope you will take part in. One other addition that we have, the miller's wife, Marlene LaFreux, is over here with some items, new items that we have in the gift shop that are particularly for the Smithsonian and for our mill exhibit. And one of the things this year, and it has just happened within the last 24 hours, we have a replica label of the original label of the flour bags that we used here at Union Mills. And we created them. There are some over on the table. They are filled with cornmeal right now. However, they could be filled with whatever kind of flour you would want. All right? So I hope you will look at those also. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. Book signing will take place right over there. Light refreshments over there. On this table right over here. So again, Dr. Denny, thank you so much.
Get all that?